Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. This week, we're going to discuss succession, or a change in species in a plant community across either time or space. There are two different forms, primary and secondary succession, depending on whether the area is virgin ground for life or not. First off, primary succession occurs when life colonizes a new area that was previously lifeless, whether that's because it was completely new habitat or because a catastrophic event has taken place in the area to wipe out life. Examples would include a lava flow which is now cooled off and which can be colonized, a glacier which has recently retreated, or a new sand dune. Examples would include a lava flow which is now cooled off and which can be colonized, a glacier which has recently retreated, or a new sand dune. By contrast, secondary succession occurs in an area which did have a community, but which has previously been removed. The disturbances that create this opportunity for colonization are usually smaller and don't remove all the life and nutrients from a region, in contrast with the more destructive events surrounding primary succession. Examples would be hurricanes, fires, or logging. In either case, the premise behind succession is that the first settlers in a region to be colonised are hardy and more extremophile than later stages. These plants are able to extract nutrients and eke out an existence where other plants would simply not be able to. However, they leave behind a more hospitable environment which less hardy plants can access. As time goes on, the community builds up and the individual plants become less hardy. In theory, succession continues until a climax community is reached. This community is largely stable and won't change until a drastic disturbance resets the dial to an earlier succession stage. An example of a climax community would be woodland. When and if a forest fire or some other intermediate disaster takes place, the community is reset to earlier stages such as shrubland. Of note, human intervention can ensure that an earlier succession stage is stable instead of the climax community, meaning that an earlier succession stage can artificially be kept in place. This is known as a Plagioclimax or deflected succession. Now, so far this episode, I've only talked about variation in time, but this variation can also be seen across space. An early 20th century pioneer of succession called Henry Chandler Cowles observed the phenomenon around Lake Michigan. The dunes surrounding the lake continuously grow due to new sand deposits. By assuming that the plant communities that were furthest away from the lake were the oldest, Cowles was able to tease out the same pattern of succession we talked about just now, progression to a stable climax community. The tough ecosystem engineer American beachgrass, which excels at trapping sand, was dominant in the youngest habitat. By trapping sand, it created a safe haven for less hardy plants on the sheltered side. An alternative scenario exists where the path a community takes cannot be predictable. Specifically, this occurs when an environment changes continually. For example, a boulder in a rock pool that keeps being rotated, or grass growing in a new area which might impede the growth of later succession stages. Cases exist where different communities could develop in the same area, but in different environments. This is what is known as alternative stable states. A community can be switched from one of these alternative stable states to another by means of a strong interactor being added or taken out. Essentially, a big change. You can picture this as a ball in a shallow valley next to a deeper valley. If the change is big enough to move the ball onto the divide separating them, it will naturally fall into the deeper valley. In the case of the community, this means that it will switch from one stable state to the other. Human activity has proven a strong enough influence in some cases to switch communities between states. For example, declining numbers of sea otters has meant that their natural prey of urchins have been able to proliferate and prey on kelp. This means that what was once kelp forests has, in some places, been changed to what are called urchin barrens. It is currently uncertain whether these changes can be reversed, and the question will no doubt continue to be relevant into the 21st century. One final thing to note for today. There has actually been a historical divide in the literature between two schools of thought on how to view communities and the process of succession. These viewpoints are called the Gleasonian and Clementsian models, after Frederick Clements and Henry Gleason. Their difference in opinion will be the topic for next week's episode. Until then, thank you all for listening. Feel free to get in touch with the show's email address for any questions, comments, or topics for future episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.